it's pretty simple. You read the document, you understand the document, you pledge allegiance to the document, and we shake your hand. And you are every bit as much of an American as me and other people who have been here for 400 years. Just like that. That's the magic of America. And guess what? No president, no radio talk show host, no white supremacist in Virginia can ever change that. You know, Guy Benson, a strong conservative voice, wrote this on Twitter overnight. As conservatives, we should not fear or bemoan demographically shifting electorate. It's our task to make our cause relevant and accessible to more people, including those who may not initially be natural allies, and make them secure in the confidence that our ideas are better. And you know, John Meacham, I remember in 1999, George W. Bush, a man who I disagreed with many of George W. Bush's policies, with his spending. George W. Bush quietly and publicly told Republicans in no uncertain terms, I'm running in 2000, and one of the major focuses of my major focuses will be to reawaken the Republican Party to the importance to reaching out to those who may not be just like us, to Hispanics especially, the largest growing demographic group in America. We have got to put this nativism behind us, this soft bigotry, as they would
white supremacy
they would call this, which is looking more and more like white supremacy these days. And George W. Bush, in his re-election bid, got what, 44% of the Hispanic vote, because he did what Guy Benson said conservatives today need to do: make their views accessible and relevant.
And you look at just as recently as John McCain, who manages to, remember he says when a questioner, probably the kind of questioner that Laura was talking about, who's not happy with the way the country is changing, he says he's, Obama's a Muslim, and McCain shuts, quite courageously, shuts the woman down in 2008. 2012, Governor Romney, a figure who his dad was born in Mexico because he was a part of the Mormon missionary family. It was just an internationalist view. It was a party that, for all of its faults, and all institutions on this side of paradise are flawed, for all of its faults, it was about that Reagan-esque vision of all the pilgrims from all the lost places hurtling through the darkness toward home. And that is in such extreme distress now that people who have been Republicans for longer than 30 minutes, seems to me, need to fight for that part of their party or say goodbye for a very long time.
We have Susan Del Percio, Donnie Deutsch, and Gene Robinson with us as well. And we'll stay on the spirit of this discussion, Willie Geist. Michael Gerson has a really good piece out in the Washington Post about the politics at play, and then we'll get to some stunning new details pertaining some of the court proceedings with migrant children and families seeking asylum. But first, Willie, the politics at play.
Yeah, speaking of George W. Bush, Michael Gerson was a speechwriter and a senior advisor to President Bush during both of his terms, and Gerson has a new column on this topic in the Washington Post titled, "The Only Way to Save the GOP is to Defeat It." In it, Michael writes, in November, many Republican leaners and independents will face a difficult decision. The National Democratic Party under Nancy Pelosi and Charles E. Schumer doesn't share their views or values, but President Trump is a rolling disaster of mendacity, corruption, and prejudice. What should they do? they should vote Democratic in their House race, no matter who the Democrats put forward, and they should vote Republican in Senate races with mainstream candidates, unlike, say, Corey Stewart in Virginia. Why vote strategically in this case? Because American politics is in the midst of an emergency. If Democrats gain control of the House but not the Senate, they will be a check on the president without becoming a threat to his best policies from a Republican perspective, or able to enact their worst policies. The tax cut will stand, the Senate will still approve conservative judges, but the House will conduct real oversight hearings and expose both Russian influence and administration corruption. Under Republican control, important committees, such as Chairman Devin Nunes's House Intelligence Committee, have become scraping, sniveling, panting, and pathetic tools of the executive branch. Only Democratic control can drain this particular swamp. Susan Del Percio, you've worked in Republican politics for a long time. What do you make of Gerson's take in this moment?
Well, it's hard to hear, and I'm a little torn about it because I do think you should vote for who you think is the best candidate. Playing the strategic voting game is always a little difficult. It typically doesn't work out the way you want it. So I think if there are Republicans who you can support as a Republican, you should vote for them. Why should you vote for a lesser candidate if you don't think that they're up for the challenge? So that's my first point. The second point is that if you feel that a Republican for Congress, especially in the House, has been an enabler of Donald Trump, don't vote for them. It doesn't mean you have to vote for the Democrat, but it means you shouldn't vote for an enabler of Donald Trump.
Joe, what do you think?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's very difficult. I remember in Gene Robinson in 2006, I remember writing a column making the same argument along with Christopher Buckley and other Republicans who said there has to be checks on, and we're talking about George W. Bush, but on an administration that mishandled Iraq, that was talking about exporting democracy to to ending tyranny on all four corners of the globe through the United States military, which was already overstretched. We were post-Katrina, but there was this feeling that there had to be a check. There are times that you have to vote strategically. And it would be different if the legislative branch were actually an independent, functioning branch of this government, of Madison's brilliant design of a government of checks and balances. But as we've been saying here all year, Gene, the Founding Fathers, they foresaw a corrupt, tyrannical president. They never foresaw an obsequious Congress, legislative branch, that would lie down and simply rubber stamp all of the worst proposals of a tyrannical president. And whatever you want to define Donald Trump, he is not Madison and Jefferson and Franklin and Washington's idea of a president.
No, he's clearly not. And, I think the founders would be shocked that Congress hasn't acted not just to investigate this president, but probably to impeach this president. Remember, they were revolutionaries, and they absolutely specifically planned for this sort of moment. And this Congress is beyond negligent. It's beyond it's beyond pathetic, really. I think it's a crime against the Constitution that they're not fulfilling their duty even to investigate. They're protecting the president from exposure of his corruption. They're enabling this president who, and let's be certain what the contrast is. You heard that Laura Ingraham quote. I mean, that's let's not say that sounds like white supremacy or it smells like it. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is, pure and simple. And this is a president who is encouraging that, and to say nothing of all the other things that this president does that are just beyond the pale. So I agree with Mike Gerson and George F. Will. Vote Democratic.
Yeah. Michael Gerson mentioned Corey Stewart in his piece. Stewart is the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Virginia and is responding after a video surfaced from his 2017 Virginia governor campaign in which he praised the Confederacy for rebelling against the Union.
This is the state of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and James Monroe. It's the state of the founders. It's the state of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. But it's also the state of Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson and J.E.B. Stewart.
Yeah.
Because at the base of it, Virginians, we think for ourselves.
Yeah.
And if the established order is wrong, we rebel.
Amen.
We did that in the Revolution, we did it in the Civil War, and we're doing it today.
Stewart, who grew up in Minnesota and moved
Of
to
course he did, by the way.
and
Of
moved
course
to
he grew up
Virginia
in
in
Minnesota.
his
They're always the worst.
late 20s.
Transplants saying, hey, I'm a rebel.
Is facing incumbent Democrat
boot?
Tim Kaine this November. Stewart responded to the video by telling CNN, quote, unlike wimpy Tim Kaine, really, Virginians have a warrior spirit and a rebel heart. And in a tweet yesterday that Stewart has since deleted, he attacked Michigan Democratic candidate for governor Abdul El Sayed as a, quote, ISIS commie.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Stewart,
These
you're
people.
Yeah.
They're
You know, where's he coming from? He goes to Minnesota, and he's trying to play tough Southern
Well,
boy.
Minnesotans are usually nice people.
Yeah, I know. He's not, but he should go back instead of
I don't
trying to
think they
play
want
the
him.
role of tough Southerner. Hey, John Meacham.
Lord, yeah.
I really don't know where to start, except, unfortunately, you can find far too many examples of these sort of posers. This guy posing as a Southerner, as a son of the Confederacy. But all of this talk, from Laura Ingraham to Corey Stewart, overlooks one small detail of American history. That many Americans said the same ignorant thing hundreds of years ago, and 150 years ago when the Irish came. They said the same ignorant things when the Germans came. They said the same ignorant things when the Italians came to America. There have been a small segment of know-nothings who have been saying ignorant things about immigrants coming to this country for over 240 years. And yet, you know, I ticked off a list a couple of days ago of immigrants, their families that came recently and transformed Silicon Valley. If we had Donald Trump and Corey Stewart's view of America, then you wouldn't have had Steve Jobs over here. You wouldn't have had the founder of Google over here, the founder of Yahoo over here, the founder of Reddit over here, the founder of eBay over here. I mean, and if we want to go back a few years, even Albert Einstein may have ended up in a Nazi concentration camp with Donald Trump's viewpoint on immigration.
Yeah. It's extraordinary that we're still having this conversation in 2018, but we're going to have to keep having it again and again. The talk about the Confederacy and the talk about secession as a successor to the Revolution, I find as a Southerner abhorrent. The South, the Civil War, let's just say it quickly here, was about the institution of slavery. It was about the perpetuation of that institution. It was a struggle to end the journey enshrined in the preamble to the Constitution toward a more perfect union. Those soldiers took up arms against the Constitution of the United States and would have ended the great American experiment that led to, say, victory in World War II. That led to, say, victory over Soviet communism in the deadliest potential struggle in human history over the 40 years or more of the Cold War. It was, and if anyone who doubts that, and start tweeting, We can talk about this for the rest of the year, but that's what it was about. And when people try to appropriate it, and we're approaching, this is the weekend of the anniversary of the terrible violence in Charlottesville, where the President of the United States, 1 year ago, you may remember, had a hard time figuring out which side of the argument he was on, neo-Nazis and Klansmen, or the people who were standing up for the America you just described. And that is one of the many reasons we have a crisis in the moral leadership of the country.
And Donnie Deutsch, the hypocrisy, of course, as always, when it comes to Donald Trump, is just staggering. Here, this guy has been fighting against chain migration.
Oh, my God.
This is the most evil thing of all time. You know, with chain migration, what happens is you bring in MS-13 and they're going to come in and they're going to shoot up your white neighborhood and go to your white malls and shoot up your white malls, and they're going to go to your white high schools and shoot up your white high. You know, of course, as we've said before, MS-13 accounts for far less than 1% of the illegal immigrants that come to this country. But chain migration must end now,
my Lord,
writes Donald Trump, except for the fact, Donnie, his in-laws have been trying to get into the country on chain migration. And yesterday, Melania Trump's parents became U.S. citizens through...
How does he miss that?
The same chain migration route that Donald Trump has been demonizing for a year now.
Yeah. Of course, there's the rules for all of us, and then there's rules for Donald Trump. And this is, I mean, the hypocrisy is not even there needs to be a new word beyond hypocrisy to describe that. You know, going back to the Laura Ingraham thing, and the thing is that Laura Ingraham must be on some cable access to get on the air, actually get on and say that. Oh, wait, no, wait, she's on Fox. She's on a major network and says that basically make America white again. Her whole argument, beyond being reprehensible and completely counter to what we're about, is also false in the sense of that our shifting demographics has very little to do with immigration. And the reality is actually, as of 2007, every year, babies being born in this country, whites now are the minority. It's happening in this country. It's not about, oh, people are pouring on the borders as we speak. It's who we are now. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, nor should we put the genie back. That's who we are. And, you know, Donald Trump, once and for all, we need to just really look at what his slogan, Make America Great Again, means. We know what it means. We know what it meant. Make America white again. And that's what that slogan always was. The dog whistle was there. And the fact that now, 18 months into his presidency, that we have people like Laura Ingraham just blatantly, as Gene said, there's no soft here, bigoted, racist comments. Guys, whether you like it or not, we are a mosaic. It's not changing. It's who we are. And even if you built the wall, which is not going to happen, it's who we are, and thank God it's who we are.
Well, and Alex, if you can get that Ronald Reagan clip again that we started the block with, we'll get it to end the block. Because there are a lot of conservatives that have claimed to be disciples of Ronald Reagan. And this has actually been happening for years now. Actually, people run around quoting Ronald Reagan, and temperamentally, ideologically, in every way possible, they are, in fact, the antithesis of Ronald Reagan and are against everything Ronald Reagan stood for. And you certainly could talk about big government, the fact that these so-called conservatives in Congress, along with Donald Trump, have passed the largest spending bill ever, have the largest federal debt ever, exploded the deficit, the yearly deficit, have been more fiscally irresponsible than any Congress in U.S. history. And yet, they still claim the mantle of Reagan while they're being demagogues. Do we have that Reagan clip, Alex, that we can run? I'll tell you what, Mika, why don't we go out to break on it, and I'll just tell all my conservative friends, take a good, close look at what Ronald Reagan said, because it's very telling. He didn't say this in like June of 1986. This was his farewell speech to America. Still ahead on Morning Joe, what do we have, Mika?
Well, we'll tell you about a mother and a daughter deported to El Salvador, but a judge steps in and orders the plane to be turned around. That story's coming up. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
And here's Reagan.
And since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it's fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. It was stated best in a letter I received not long ago. A man wrote me and said, "You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American."
New court filings show that hundreds of migrant children still remain separated from their parents. Of the 2,551 separated from their parents at the southern border, 559 still are in government custody. 386 have parents who already have been deported, and officials have heard from 299 parents in the last week. However, they don't have any information for 26 parents and still have not filed a plan to reunite any of the 559 remaining children with their families. Meanwhile, a federal judge in Washington ordered a plane carrying a mother and daughter to return to the U.S. while their deportation hearing is underway. U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan called the removal pretty outrageous and threatened to hold Attorney General Jeff Sessions in contempt. ACLU attorneys were notified of the removal of the woman and her daughter during recess and requested that the judge delay the deportation. Upon arrival in El Salvador, the pair was sent back to Texas, this according to DHS. Gene Robinson, this is a problem that persists despite all the spotlight, all the media attention over the last couple of months on this child separation. They still have hundreds of children without their parents at the border.
You know, this is a crime. This is really a crime that has taken place. You call it kidnapping, call it whatever you want. But it is beyond outrageous that 559 children remain separated from their parents, and that the government knows where apparently nearly 300 parents are, and has spoken with them, but has no plan to reunite the children with their parents. How can that be? How can that possibly be? And I believe, I hope that since this administration wants to behave in this way, I hope other judges, perhaps the judge in San Diego who's in charge of that case, acts the way Judge Sullivan did and says, wait a minute, we have laws in this country, and those laws are going to be enforced, and I'm going to start holding people in contempt of court, in criminal contempt of court, which is where they are. That's the situation now. This is just outrageous.
And I guess case by case, there's legal recourse when we know of a case, Susan. But to put this in pretty plain terms, it appears our government has gone rogue with hundreds of children, kidnapped them, is currently abusing them, and in this case decided to deport one and remove the child in the middle of a hearing. It doesn't feel, this doesn't feel normal, and this feels illegal and definitely un-American.
It absolutely is, Mika. And on top of that, we see that this administration was not even close to being prepared for what they wanted to even do, which is why we're in this disaster that we have. I wish that the First Lady would take her parents, her parents who are newly citizens, down to the border and see what's happening to those children. Now, that's something that maybe that they could relate to, seeing how hard it is and the struggle that people have coming into this country. And don't forget, a lot of these were trying to come in legally. These weren't just all people trying to come in legally, but this is not America. This is not how we treat people anywhere, nonetheless at our border.
John, following up on what Susan just said, I mean, the Trump administration wasn't close to being prepared for the ramifications of this policy. They were warned about it by HHS officials, saying that it would have a devastating effect on children. And we've seen now that they're so desperate to try to clean things up that they've now told the ACLU, hey, you guys be in charge of it. You handle it. But I will say yesterday's another good example of how the ACLU has stepped up in this disaster and has done remarkable work and continue to do remarkable work day in and day out, not for the benefit of liberals, for the benefit of children and for the benefit of America's reputation across the globe.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, sort of linking all this together this morning, you've said kind things about two very different American institutions. One is Ronald Reagan and the other is the ACLU. Rarely do the twain get linked together and pointed out as working in alliance. But that's what the country at its best, and this may sound sentimental, but the hell with it, because it's actually true. The country at its best is this combination of forces that may or may not like each other, that may or may not work together in the morning, but will in the afternoon. That's the nature of compromise. The ACLU really grew out of the Red Scare of the 19-teens. We just heard that this isn't America. Unfortunately, this is America. We shouldn't blink. We shouldn't shy away from the darker aspects of our past, whether it's fighting a civil war over slavery or Woodrow Wilson resegregating the federal government and curbing civil liberties during the First World War, all the way through FDR and Japanese internment. One of Ronald Reagan's first political speeches, in a way, came in a ceremony to honor the Japanese American soldiers who, despite internment, had gone and fought so heroically for the Allied cause. He went with Joseph Stilwell to Southern California to present a medal to a family of a soldier who had died. And ultimately, President Reagan, 40 years later, would be the president who apologized for that great national sin. So this is not celebratory, but it is a sign that I think fair-minded people will look at the panoply of human experience and say, this side gets it right here, this side gets it right there. And that's what the country's supposed to be. We're not supposed to demonize either somehow out of the public square. We have to be in this together.
We do, and Donnie, how fascinating it is that over this first half hour today, while we look at the abuses of this administration and comments that certainly sound like calls for white supremacy, look at the vast array of voices that have pushed back, even with Reagan, beyond the grave at that sort of backward thinking. You've Ronald Reagan to the ACLU, to Guy Benson, to a federal judge, actually saying, turn that plane around and get them back in the United States of America. We still have due process in America, whether Donald Trump believes in it or not.
Yeah.
So for all the negative, there's a hell of a lot of good out there to see too. Good conservatives, liberals, independents pushing back at these abuses.
Yeah, Joe, it's interesting. I bet you get some of the same thing. You've said on this show a lot, and I've tried to say it also, that despite how terrifying things are right now, our system holds. And even with that guy in the White House, these checks and balances do work. And it's just why the Founding Fathers were so brilliant. You know, what's going to really be the tell is in November. And if anything, if there's any harbinger based on what happened the other day, if that same, Mike Allen brought up a brilliant point leading into the show, that if that same math, if the same swing that happened in Ohio in that one district happens across the country, we'll pick up 43 seats. So I think the American people will speak. I want to just go back to the Reagan thing, and I said this to Willie, and it would be interesting if you put up a clip of W, of his father, of Obama, of Clinton, of the last presidents. The tone, the calm of when you listen to Ronald Reagan speak versus the complete opposite. This is the first president in our lifetime when he comes on the air, as opposed to the Commandant-in-Chief, the calmer in chief, is the anger in chief, is the it just unnerves you every time he speaks. And just listening to Reagan beyond the words, which were so heartwarming and reaffirming, his overall tone, understanding that job in that office is every time you get up there is to somehow put your arms and bring 300 million people together, versus every time Trump gets out there, beyond his words, the visceral quality, the tone of which he speaks pulls us apart. And it's a sad, comforting look back that reminds us of how we live today.
Yeah, it's almost easy to forget it hasn't always been that way. You don't have to go back that long to see it. Joe, I just want to underline one thing about the family separation, which is that the entire rationale for this, and we've heard it publicly from the president, the attorney general, to people out of the White House, was that this would be a deterrent to people coming to this country illegal, that we'd have fewer people coming, they would see they might be separated from their children. Jeff Sessions said that out loud. Well, this week we got the numbers in about family members arrested at the border. The difference is marginal at best. Along the border last month in July, 9,258 family members were arrested. That was down from 9,434 in June, so by about 150 people. In other words, this plan that separated families and caused all this stir, that was supposed to be a deterrent, has not been a deterrent.
It's all a sham. Everything is a sham that Donald Trump has been saying about immigration. And we've talked about it, Willie, haven't we, for a year and a half, that actually throughout Donald Trump's campaign, that this invading horde of illegal immigrants to America that requires the building of a wall, that requires family separation, that requires all of these harsh measures.
Yeah.
In fact, were proven to be lies by the statistics now of Donald Trump's own government, and before of the federal government, that showed that there was actually a negative net immigration pattern from Mexico. More people going back to Mexico than coming into the United States, Mika.
Yeah.
Well, Donald Trump was running for president of the United States. It was all, I can't say this enough to my friends and family members who are Trump supporters.
Yeah.
If you look at Donald Trump's own government websites and look at the trends through the years, everything he told you about this invasion of illegal immigrants in 2016 was a lie.
Yeah.
More people going back to Mexico than coming into America. And Mika, this morning still, you have young children ripped from their parents. Also, Donald Trump can make a cheap political point.
I get that.
And where is Ivanka, as you always say?
Nowhere.
Why isn't she doing something to fix this? Where is Melania, who yesterday had her comfortable parents use chain migration to come to this country, while little children, while infants, while toddlers are still separated from their families on the border? I don't get it.
Well, and also the media needs to step up, and I understand, you know, our colleagues over at Fox News, there are shows in the evening that exist with opinion, of course, but where are the guardrails when you talk about data that is clear, you know, about the numbers? I mean, these Laura Ingraham and her white supremacy speech, I'm still at a loss as to how that made it to air. At some point, there have to be guardrails. Where's the management here? These are hosts with a direct line to the president. We know about that because Trump tried to do that with us. And as soon as we started saying no to things that were clearly wrong, racism, bigotry, whatever else, and he couldn't get us to sort of parrot exactly what he wanted us to say, and found that his strategy with us didn't work. He just gets angry at us on Twitter now, but he doesn't talk to us because we don't actually mimic what he says. But these hosts do. They do. And that, you know, if they have weak character and they can look in the mirror, that's their problem. But where's management? Who heads up Fox News? Who can allow this to happen and say that we're a news network?
I mean, again, we're talking about, it's one thing if you have different views on immigration policies on the border.
For sure, it's complicated.
If you have a different view on abortion, on same-sex marriage, but when you have a speech that is just, it lines up directly with what white supremacists say. I do think at that point, Mika's question is a fair question to ask. Where is management?
Yeah.
Who approved a white supremacist speech to go on the air yesterday on Fox News in prime time? Who's approving that? What does Rupert Murdoch think? What do his sons think? What do his family think? Do they think that is America? They're in this country from outside of America. Do they think that what she said last night was okay? Do they think, or Wednesday night, do they think that throwing the dog whistles out and instead just appealing directly to white supremacists is where they want that network to go?
That's their business model?
That's
nuts.
You know what? That is, as John Meacham says, that may be a good starter for a night or two. It's a terrible finisher. And I can't believe that the management there, the Murdochs, and the people that own News Corp are happy that white supremacist speeches are being given in prime time.
And a siren to Fox management. If your hosts are so desperate to be close to the president and so desperate to be close to power that they can't ask questions and they can't use their brains and know between right and wrong, what do you have exactly in your programming? That's a question we're asking.
Joe, I'd also
Still ahead,
challenge
why
you.
this family separation crisis may not be something Democrats will be able to capitalize on to retake the House this November. Axios co-founder Mike Allen will explain the messaging problems that both parties are having with typical go-to issues. Those details are next on Morning
And Donnie
Time.
Deutsch will finish his sentence.
Join us now, the co-founder of Axios, Mike Allen. Mike, good morning. Your opening greeting, please.
Oh, good morning, Willie, and happy Summer Friday.
There it is, a Summer Friday. Mike, all right, so Axios looking at a midterm message, a bit of a mess that Republicans and Democrats are both facing. It seems like there's some low-hanging fruit on both sides, but they're not able to capitalize on it.
No, you're exactly right, Willie. They're both having to make on-the-go changes to their messages. The biggest dud of all, of course, is Republicans and tax cuts. Remember, early in the year, they told us that those tax cuts were the key to keeping the House. That, of course, didn't even make it out of March when now Representative Conor Lamb was on your air from Pennsylvania. That race showed that the tax cuts just didn't have their power. But for Democrats, they had thought that Russia and Mueller would be great issues for them. In fact, it turns out that that's motivating Republicans more. It's fueling that Republican rage. Abolish ICE turned out to go too far for Democrats. Now they're having to dial that back. Republicans are using that issue, saying we support the immigration issues. But, Willie, here's how the president and Republicans could still pay the check for those immigration policies that you've been talking about throughout the show. The New York Times Upshot is up with new data about the Trump coalition, and they point out that one of the essential groups to the president's victory in 2016 and one of the important groups for Republicans in the midterms is college-educated women. And those are one of the groups that are going to shy away from those immigration policies, hate the kids at the border issue, and there are already signs that that could make a big difference.
Hey, Mike, Donnie, I've been working with the DNC and Tom Perez, and their polling clearly shows that, it's not the high-minded issue, it's health care. It's, from almost a 2 to 3-1 margin that voters, if you say to them, look, they're going to, your premiums are going up and your prescription drugs are going up and this is wrong. And you can wrap it around corruption and you could wrap it around all the kind of some of the other kind of more macro things. But the micro thing is, at the end of the day, as we've always known, these voters vote with their pocketbooks.
Yes.
And, that is the message that race by race in a retail world, the Democrats are going to have to keep knocking on.
No, that's exactly right. And this fall, premiums are going to go up. It's another reason Republicans have such trepidation. And Donnie, one other number that you will appreciate, and it shows the importance of this immigration issue that we've been talking about throughout the show, and that is if you look at key groups of the Trump coalition, key voter groups in the midterms, if you look at how they feel about immigration, that is almost exactly how they feel about President Trump. There's a perfect correlation between Trump popularity and the respondents' view of his positions on immigration.
All right, Mike Allen, thank you very much. Have a great weekend. We'll be reading
Happy weekend to y'all.
Axios as always. Joe, we'll get into this in the next hour, but Donnie wants to hop in on the guilty pleasures ban discussion of yesterday. He's got some real gems. He's got some real gems coming for you.
Well, by the way, Mike Allen needs to redo his Axios report about the things that could hurt the Democratic Party because, obviously, they overplayed their hands on ICE, right? And obviously, they have overplayed their hands in other ways as well. But now, Donnie tells us that he's talking to the DNC chairman, Tom Perez.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a big thumbs down for the Democrats right there. That's a loss of at least a net 12 to 14 seats. So
he didn't want that out there, but I figured, I always get ahead of the problem, in effect. I know, so let's deal with the fallout of it right now, I think is a good idea.
Well, I guess Willie, Donnie has money actually on Republicans retaining control of Congress, and he's doing whatever he can to make sure his money comes in.
He's throwing the game. That's right. All right, still ahead, Vice President Mike Pence lays out the details for President Trump's proposed new branch of the military, the Space Force. The idea is being met with skepticism, even from some senior defense officials. Morning Joe's coming right back.